right, so it has almost been 1 week since the launch of Marathon, and things are looking pretty decent. The game is currently sitting at 88,000 peak players on Steam. The review score is sitting at a 90%, and I believe it's at 4.5 stars on PlayStation. Seems to be lots of folks posting content across YouTube and Instagram on the game. There's lots of cosplay and fan art and all kinds of stuff that people are doing in the interest of Marathon's launch and its lore and universe. And look, I'm going to be totally honest, I am not the guy to be placing significance in player count numbers or review scores or whatever the case may be. These are just the discussions that we're having online when it comes to live service multiplayer games, and it kind of seems like games are less about the experiences that people have with them and just more about the optics of how the game is being received or the perception of what the internet thinks about it, at least in this small little bubble of live service games. That's what it feels like. And I mean, we can do the player count thing, probably going to reserve this for another video, but Arc Raiders is basically the only game that you can bring up in that discussion because Tarkov, most of those players are on the PSG launcher. ABI wasn't even available on Steam until a couple seasons into its live service. Nobody's even going to bring up games like Dark and Darker or Hunt Showdown because they're just niche games. And then they'll pit it up against something like a deck builder roguelike game just to make a point about, oh, they have 88,000 players. That's it? 80,000 players? Just without disappointment, the dumbest shit that a gamer who enjoys seeing games thrive has to see on the internet. But anyway, yeah, I might just reserve that for a whole other video because the lack of nuance in this particular discussion is actually pretty astonishing to me. But at the end of the day, I guess it's player count, black or white. Is the number higher or is it lower? That's really all we care about, right? Personally, I was fully expecting there to be a 70% or mixed review score on Steam a few hours into launch. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that, and this may sound crazy, the people who are not spending all their time dogging on the game are actually enjoying it quite a bit. But anywho, what has happened in this 6 days since Marathon's launch? Well, as we mentioned earlier, community does seem to be enjoying the game quite a bit with some bits of feedback here and there. Bungie already tried to screw the community in terms of monetization practices, and the community let them know immediately. Bungie's initial response to the monetization complaints were shortly after the complaints surfaced online, but they showed what they're actually doing to take those changes further. They have put out a tweet yesterday showing some additions to the battle pass, getting 3 new shell skins, as well as a gun skin, I believe a complimentary triage skin, and of course the adjusted pricing that went live in today's update. And they went ahead and credited players, anybody who bought a currency pack before the update, with the adjusted pricing. And from what I understand, a total stark contrast in how they were handling Destiny 2's live service, where they couldn't give a goddamn about player feedback. And honestly, I mean, it makes sense with how much Sony spent on acquiring the studio and this being the first game that they deliver under that acquisition. They can't necessarily afford to not listen to player feedback. I mean, especially with the subgenre that they've now included themselves in, they can't afford to do so. And I'm not going to be the one to say, oh, well, they should have been listening anyway. Look, as somebody who's a fan, who's an ex-fan of annual sports games and who has absolutely despised what EA has done with the new skate, when we're genuinely taking steps, not baby steps, strides in the right direction, that is to be commended. We have to, of course, this is a two-way street. If they're reinforcing that they are listening to our feedback and are interested in what we have to offer in terms of what we want to see in the game and things we want to see change, then let's appreciate when they actually show that to us. But yes, I would agree that they shouldn't have just dropped the game trying to slight players on day one. I do think that is absolutely mind-boggling, to be honest. Some other feedback that players were giving in terms of sponsored kits was that it seems like the resources were just a bit too harsh for a game that heavily relies on having an abundance of them in raid. And honestly, for the kind of tuning that this game has in terms of the scarcity of resources, if everything that you had to acquire was done in raid, I'm talking ammo, meds, barter materials, upgrade materials, the game would be an incredibly slow burn. So it's nice that they're taking a look at this and, seeing where things may be falling short in terms of economy and the resource distribution across, the little buildings that you find across maps and the resources that they give you for the free sponsored kits. And they actually address this in today's update. We take a look at the item economy section. It shows that they increased the number of med cabinets and munitions crates that can spawn on perimeter, quest map, A relatively quiet map, of course, the map that everybody's going to be familiar with, as that's where the game starts you off at. They have those little buildings scattered around where you can find, some leftover meds and ammo and things like that you can use for future runs. Going to be seeing some more of those resources in those buildings, so that's pretty nice to see. Increase the amount of starting ammo in Mida, Syak, and Arachne free sponsored kits, also nice. And reduce the frequency of UESC Grenadiers dropping EMPs is very interesting. And the last bit of feedback, the most important bit of feedback here, obviously aside from the monetization, is the UX. The user experience in this game is something I don't think anybody can really vouch for right now. There's a really strong lack of quality of life that mostly shows itself in raid, I want to say, when you're trying to bring some attachments home by stripping guns down. And the game actually just does not really allow you to do that optimally. You have to hover over each individual mod and hold down a key until it takes the mod off. God forbid you're running low on free slots in your inventory, because if you are, then oh well, you're gonna have to figure out what to drop and then unequip the attachments from the gun to go into your inventory, and then equip another gun so that you can place them on that one. Pick the things that you dropped back up into your inventory and then sort everything back. So that's probably like the most obvious offender that I can think of right now in the user experience. Then you have some smaller stuff like when you're bartering or buying stuff in the armory, you can't buy it in stacks, which I think may be by design, because there is things that you can buy in stacks that cost a bit more or that cost some barter materials. And the other stuff is all offered for its individual price. So I don't know, maybe this is an intentional decision. It would be nice to just be able to multiply those things. So if I'm going to get a stack of shields, stack of 3 shields, if I can just continue on and I can get 9 by pressing, they already have the little navigator keys. So you can press A and D to go from more to less in your stack size. And you can press Q and E to go between the menus, W and S to go between up and down. So they already have these navigator keys that allows you to split, separate stacks, go from menu to menu. I believe that we can add something that allows you to purchase more than just one instance of an item in the trading. And another really big hiccup in the game right now is clarity with how many cores and implants things there are. It actually doesn't matter how much time you put into the game. You would have to hover over each of them to see what they do anyway, because they all share the same icon. There's a little bit of clarity in where things go. The implants would have the head, body, and legs little icon attached to them, but you still don't know what those implants do unless you actually check them out. You hover over them in the menu. I honestly believe that if this were to improve at all, they would just have to design an individual icon for every single one of these implants, because there's no way that even when you get accustomed to what all these things do, that you would know unless you hovered over it. So it's just these details about the UX that add up over a while, turns it more into a tedium thing than a playtime experience or learning curve thing, because no matter what side of that spectrum you fall on, you still have to hover over every single one of those implants to know what they do. And I think it is a bit different to cores, because you're going to run into a lot more, I want to say, green and blue implants than you are going to run into cores at all. And usually when you are running into cores, it's going to be the grays and the greens. You end up becoming familiar with those if, like I think most folks are probably going to be running 1 to 2 shells at a time. And sure, you do want to know what other cores do, just so that you know the capability of other shells in terms of counterplay and things like that. But in the context of efficient looting, I think cores right now are fine, because for one, you can identify which shell it belongs to in the menu. And 2, if you're mostly playing 1 to 2 shells to begin with, you're going to familiarize yourself with what the gray and green cores do, so that you barely even have to hover over them. You could just drag them in and deal with that later. Because relatively speaking, there is a lot more implants and things that you want to read in terms of what those do in the game than cores, whereas you can just drag them on and kind of figure that out later. You're not going to be running into a whole bunch of shell cores throughout the course of a raid. It's usually lots more implants that you're looting off of runners' bags and inside buildings and things like that. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that is our current state of Marathon. 6 days in here. Of course, the game is going to be out for a week come tomorrow. And I'm pretty excited to see what they've got going on with the Tau Ceti Cup coming up on March 14th. And yeah, I've really been enjoying this game. I hope everybody else has been as well. We're going to be talking about some juicy stuff next video, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And if you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the bell so that you never miss another video, and leave some thoughts in the comment section below. I want to know what you think. Thank you so much for watching.